moving on from Ben Whittaker in the light heavyweight division, I want to talk to you about something that's been a little bit more, I guess you could say, contentious. Keyshawn Davis, Teofimo Lopez, they're both returning this week. I don't know if you saw the little on-stage utterance they had between each other. Teofimo, I'll put a link in the description box below if anybody wants to see that. If they haven't, they had a bit of a back and forth quietly on stage during the presser, because Teofimo Lopez had basically exposed Keyshawn for wanting a photograph, which to me isn't the biggest of deals at all, but maybe he's tried to portray that as he was fanboying him and stuff like that. And Keyshawn didn't like that. And he said, I found it offensive as to what you said and did. And they had a bit of a back and forth. There's something that sort of quite fairly similar between them. And that is that they've decided to, let's say, engage in certain substances that aren't typical of an athlete. With Keyshawn Davis, his last fight was a no contest because he was found to be smoking marijuana. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to say it's not the biggest of deals, Chris, but the fact of the matter is, when it comes to Keyshawn, the reason it might actually matter a little bit more than saying it's not such a big deal is because of his reasoning behind it. Base, I just want to read you something that he said in an interview, and then I want to get your views on it. It's an interview by Sean Nam, which is featured in the boxing scene. And Keyshawn says, and I quote, "I've been through serious mental health issues. Back then, before I was even on the Olympic team, I used to do things to harm myself. I went to the mental home. I was on medication for my mental health daily. Just throughout that process, I was still smoking. Ever since I did put the weed down, I've been a way better person, man. My coaches see. They say I got way more energy. Even people at the UFC facility in Las Vegas that I train at. They're like, I don't know, Keyshawn. There's something different about you in this camp. I feel like you just take it more serious. Like I said, I had to ask God and reflect on myself to really overcome that addiction. It wasn't until I made a promise to God that I was going to stop smoking. I didn't honor that promise, right? Days go past, something doesn't feel right. Long story short, I was like, yo, I just lied to God. The first chance I got, I started smoking. I repented. I really felt bad. Like, I really did this. And honestly, after I did that, God took my urge away. I had an encounter with God, honestly. Ever since that day, I repented and I really felt bad. I never had the urge again." Now, when he's talking about starting this because of certain mental health challenges and how he turned to his faith essentially and has credited God for helping him get past that urge, do we see a guy who's going to go to an even new level because he's renewed mentally and emotionally? Or do you observe that and think, oh, this guy's got underlying problems and he needed the substance to try and control that? In other words, does it make him appear more mentally strong, that he's been able to overcome this and is renewed? Or do you see him as more mentally weak, that there's an outstanding issue there behind the scenes?
I definitely think that there are underlying issues and there were underlying issues. But if you check it, I guess based on the quote and the way it's sort of come across and the way it sounds, it's almost like, okay, he needed something to deal with his underlying issues, but now he's replaced that vice with another vice, although the only difference is this vice is not a substance, it's a belief. And that is a more positive way to be, because ultimately any substance that you can put into your body, no matter whether it's a natural from the earth or whatever, they can always be tainted, they can always be laced with stuff, there can always be things in there that ain't supposed to be in there, which can compromise you and your health.
But religion ain't a vice, is it, Base?
It can be for some people. For some people, their religion is their be all and end all, and they can't do anything without that having that religion upon them. And in that case, if everything you're doing is being dictated by, maybe the scriptures or your belief in God, in the higher power, and every move you make is a literal thing based on what's in the Bible rather than your actual interpretations on how it's supposed to be applied in the modern day, you might say it's a vice potentially. But if we're looking at that, it would maybe slightly better to have that as your vice than a substance that ultimately can potentially poison you if, not cut correctly, if you get a poor batch. But yeah, it could, like I said, maybe it shows that he's now strong enough to get away from needing a physical substance, but he hasn't been able to show that he can just do by himself. Like, he has still needed something else to cling on, or to give him maybe even a false sense of strength and resolve in that aspect. But I credit him and I applaud him for being able to stop smoking, really.
Yeah, I mean, personally, obviously, I'm a man of faith, so obviously I'm going to see it differently. To me, though, I see it as in maybe we shouldn't be trying to change with the modern world, because the modern world is I mean, without trying to get too deep here, imagine being around in Nazi Germany. If that is if you want to get all modern, you're going to have to alter your behavior and your mentality based on what's modern and fashionable. That wouldn't have been a good thing. So for me, I kind of like the fact that he feels as though he's found this stability in his life now, and that there's something to focus on, which doesn't include substances, and he's more likely to live the life of an athlete. But obviously, I'm coming from a different place to you. The thing, though, I wonder with Keyshawn is the fact that he was mentioning mental health. And I do wonder if that's something that could potentially come up again in future. One of the things I do like about him, though, he does seem to be a very likable character. Even when he's talking about opponents he wants to fight, or even the way he confronted Teofimo Lopez and he was pressing him a little bit, he still comes across as very respectful. And so, to me, I think that there's something there within him that wants him to he wants to be calm. He wants to be set on a certain path. And if that is going to be faith for him, along with boxing, maybe you can start to see him focus on one thing alone, and he starts to go down that one-track mind towards success within the sport. So from my personal perspective, I like what I'm hearing from him in terms of focusing on one thing. I know there's going to be people out there who are going to be telling me, Chris, it should be legalized. There's nothing wrong with it. I understand your position, but that's a different argument. The fact is, if he knows I shouldn't be doing this because it could end up leading to a no contest, it could end up getting me a ban, it's high-risk behavior to be doing that. It suggests as though, he needs it. It suggests genuine addiction if you're willing to risk that. Now, with regards to Teofimo Lopez, he has been admitting that he's taken ayahuasca. He gave an interview on Cigar Talk, and he was talking about dabbling with that and how he had these spiritual experiences he was explaining. Now, he's always been a guy who's been on the periphery, on the edge from a psychological and emotional perspective. Many would argue. Some people feel that balance he hasn't always got right. We saw with Deontay Wilder when he started dabbling in ayahuasca, which, for those that might not be aware, it's a type of hallucinatory inducing brew. It's a drug, essentially. And he said that he's been experimenting with that. And when Deontay Wilder did that, many people felt as though he had become a lot calmer. And that's something that Deontay Wilder himself has said, that he had certain experiences that changed the way he thinks about life. And in the build-up to the last fight with Joseph Parker, you were saying, I believe, that you'd noticed a difference in energy when he had been around Anthony Joshua compared to when he'd been talking on camera. And I just felt that actually that's probably Deontay being quite calm. He had been quite calm in the past until he gets to fight week. And then in fight week, you're going to see a switch. That switch never came. And then when we saw him in the ring, he was lacking that same sort of spite that he has. He wasn't willing to plant his feet as much as he used to be. There wasn't that aggression there. He looked like a different person. And even the way he took the loss, it just seemed to not bother him as much. Is it possible that Teofimo Lopez, because of his own potential dabbling with substances to deal with certain emotional and mental health issues, has done something that could negatively impact him? What's your take on that, Base?
Yeah, quite possibly. But just before I go into that, because there's a lot to sort of unpack there. I just kind of want to double back to the Keyshawn Davis thing real quick. I'm very keen on, words meaning, words having deep meaning, and you should always kind of use the correct words for what your intentions are. So I think I maybe misrepresented myself when we was talking about the Christian, the faith, as opposed to the sort of the weed. Being obviously a Christian myself, families being a Christian, when I was using the word vice, I wasn't thinking of it from, I guess, its literal sense of being like an immoral or a wicked thing, of showing poor character and whatnot. I was thinking of it just more as something that you need to get through, like almost like a crutch, I suppose, something that you kind of need to have to help you get through your situations. So that's, I just wanted to say, for anyone was not trying to take any sort of swipes at any form of religion. That wasn't the case. It was just maybe I've just used the wrong word. And I do, as I said, me and Chris, we both have very deep vocabulary, so I have to make sure that I do come across correctly, because I don't want people to misquote me or misrepresent. Now, back to Teofimo and obviously Deontay.
Well, now that you said that, let me just say this then. Is it to switch up the thing about Teofimo? Is it possible that he's using ayahuasca as a crutch then? Is that possible?
Quite possible. I mean, the thing is, we don't know when he started, but I know that it's something that people normally do more than once. And the reason I know that myself is because I was lucky enough to be on a live stream with Nanito Denare, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was explaining that he's done ayahuasca on several occasions, and he said for him it helps you find the true you. whatever that true you may be. And he'd taken it prior to some of his most recent best victories. I think especially maybe after the first Inoue fight and some other things like that. So he said it affects different people in different ways, and it's all about ultimately he said, like, if you're pretending, it's gonna bring the real you out. But if you're a calm person, it might sort of refocus and rechannel you and make you more aggressive if that's who you really are. And if vice versa, if you're an actor, it might basically stop you from acting because you have violent reactions when you're trying to go against your natural self. That's what he said about it. So with regards to Teofimo, if you look at how he was prior to Lomachenko, and he had a sort of a very stern demeanor. Everything was like very sort of focused, channeled, and he didn't seem all over the place, for a lack of a better phrase. He actually seemed very sort of focused and locked in. Now maybe that was because it was for Vasily Lomachenko. But after that point, and then after the Kambosos fight especially, is when you saw this radical change, reawakening, this reimagining of Teofimo Lopez. So it's possible that he could have started his ayahuasca journey from then, and maybe that's why some of the very weird statements and a lot of the the scriptures that he quotes, which don't really seem to make sense to the situation he's in for the most part, it all started after that. So almost like he had this mental break from losing to Kambosos, like, how dare I lose to Kambosos kind of thing. That's what, because it all seems to have started from then onwards. And yes, if it's something that he is doing on more than one occasion or fairly regularly, then you're right that he could be using that as a vice or as a crutch. And ultimately, if it has changed his personality to the point where he can only ever lock in when he's in chaos, like the Josh Taylor fight, as opposed to how things were prior to that, then that could also be a bad thing for him coming up to the Jermaine Ortiz fight, which is going to be happening not too long from now. So it's theoretically it could be either or. I don't really know, but I'm assuming it's probably not the unless you know what you're taking it for. I would assume it's probably not the best thing to do.
And do you think, would something like that change your prediction as to how this fight would go? How you feeling it might go? And also with Keyshawn Davis, what the changes with him? He's been a tough fight with Pedraza. I know Pedraza's way past his best, but he's a wily old dog, man. He's a very skilled fighter as Pedraza. He can switch. He's skilled. He knows what he's doing in there. And if it is a close fight, I'd be surprised if they give it to Pedraza. I think they're going to give it to the prospect. So I can't envisage an upset based on the fact that it would have to be pretty dominant performance. But if Pedraza gets into a technical boxing match with him, he's going to give him something to think about. So with those changes in Keyshawn's life, with the changes perhaps in Teofimo Lopez's life, he's up against a guy who's rangy, who's tricky. They fought before in the amateurs. Teofimo has a win over him in the amateurs. We've seen that he's sparred since then many times with many rounds with Vasily Lomachenko. That familiarity gave him some success against Loma. It was a fight I felt Loma legitimately won, but it was a close fight. Are these potential banana skins for these guys because of the changes that have occurred or not?
The Keyshawn one, I don't think. I actually think he's got a better chance to do a better job now if he's more focused and not needing his crutch, his vices, the weed that he was, and he was thinking about, okay, I need this. I need, like, when can I next have some? So I think he will be clearer. His issue now may possibly come in being able to keep the weight down, because we don't know whether or not the weed and the cannabis was actually helping maybe suppress hunger, changing his digestive system, changing his metabolism and whatnot. So that would be more of an interesting thing, how much longer he stays at lightweight. If he can stay there and remain there, I think he'll be better overall. So him, I don't have any issues with. With Teofimo, I do, because outside of that ayahuasca, we've seen whenever he's in a fight that he's supposed to, on paper, win comfortably, and there's not supposed to be any issues, he seems to falter. Or, I'm not saying he doesn't necessarily lose, but he puts in a lackluster performance. Maybe he goes in there half-cocked and then has to basically fight from behind almost. The Sandor Martin was like that. Even the fight he had before that, the Pedro Campo fight, like that, he made that a lot harder work than it needed to be. Although I know it was his first fight up at 140, but
I actually thought he looked good in that fight.
I didn't. I thought he did okay, but I've seen him look a lot better against people that are still bigger than him. I felt like he didn't give me the performance I necessarily wanted in that fight. And then obviously again in the Sandor Martin fight, definitely not. Now I know it's a totally different style, but again, because he was such a strong favorite, every time I've seen him really be a strong favorite, he was a really strong favorite with Nakatani as well, and that was trouble. I know that was maybe more of a stylistic thing, but again, he seems to always do his best when there's either a lot of chaos around or he is a very firm underdog. He's a maybe like a Billy Joe Saunders type character. Like they seem to do better in that aspect. And Jermaine Ortiz, as much as everyone else is saying, yeah, like you're supposed to win this one, he is a very credible opponent. And I haven't made my pick yet. I'm actually going to do my basis picks video as soon as we finish this. But there's a piece of footage I want to watch, and there's a piece of film I need to look at. There is a very credible chance that Jermaine Ortiz could actually cause an upset, and I would not be surprised. So that may end up being the way I lean on this fight. Just Tio is, I can't necessarily trust him to be consistent. He's either perfect or he's flawed. There never seems to be a in between or a mid balance where you can say, okay, he's sitting here. It's always anarchy or it's peace, and I don't know which side he's falling on this week. So yeah.
Well, it's a big shout from Base the Kid. We're all looking forward to the fights this weekend, of course, as well. So thanks so much, Base, for joining me. I really appreciate all the time that you've given us, everything that we've covered here. Is there anything you want to say before we log off?
No, just as always, thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to jump on the channel. You are one of the kings of the boxing YouTube space. Most people, if they're not subscribed yet, and this is the first time you're seeing, please subscribe to his channel. And if you happen to pass mine as well, please subscribe to that as well. Base the Kid, the hardcore casual.
You've got to check out Base's channel. It's on YouTube. You can find him on Twitter as well. Base, thank you so much, man, and I'll speak to you soon.
No worries, man. Take care.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut notifications button. Take care. God bless.